Hi everyone, my name is Eleanor Glennon. I'm a child and adolescent psychotherapist based in Westmeath. I'm here today to talk to you about the sensory rooms in the libraries in Westmeath and how you can use them and the different type of equipment that's in them. Today we are in the library in Athlone and we're using their sensory room to demonstrate some of the equipment that will be available to you when you come to use the sensory room. It's important to note that depending on which library you go to, the equipment will be a little bit different, the space will be a little bit different, the room might be smaller or bigger. Some libraries will just have sensory equipment in the library but not necessarily a dedicated room. And you can always ask to use this equipment in a little corner in the library if you need to help your body to feel calm. So the sensory room provides a therapeutic space for you to work on different developmental tasks with your child, or it just provides a calm and relaxing space for your child to go to when they need to calm their body and minds down. This is great to have this available. We're offering this space to children where they can go when they are feeling overwhelmed or overstimulated. Maybe they're feeling stressed, a little bit too excited or nervous, whatever it is. They can go to this space and use the different sensory input that's on offer in this room to learn how to self-regulate. So we're offering them a safe space or a cozy part of the library that they can go to so that they can calm their bodies down and then rejoin the group or rejoin the class or their family or whatever activity they're participating in at the library that day. This is really important because sometimes when we have children who are particularly sensitive to sensory input or who might have sensory processing challenges or other additional needs, because we're offering this opportunity for children to have a room where they can go to when they're feeling overwhelmed, stressed, anxious, a little bit worried or excited, whatever it is, and they can go and learn to self-regulate using the sensory input that's on offer in this room. And they can do it with a co-regulating adult, like their teacher, SNA, or another safe grown-up, a parent or caregiver, whoever it is that's taking them to the library that day. But there's so much different equipment in this room. We can be really tempted to turn it all on at once, and then it turns into more of a disco or a birthday party kind of vibe. What we really are looking for is a calm and relaxing atmosphere for children to come and use the room, develop a positive association with the library, and develop some of those self-regulation skills that we were talking about. Importantly, it offers an opportunity for sensory integration and working on other developmental tasks, strength, fine and gross motor skills, or other goals that you might be working on with your child's occupational therapist or other members of their team. So it can be really important to know in advance what's heightening and what's calming and regulating for this specific child. If you don't know this, there's lots of great resources that I'll be linking after the video for you to look up maybe more specifics on your child's individual sensory profile. Otherwise, you can link in with an occupational therapist. I would really recommend doing this so that you can get the most out of your time in the sensory room. This is an amazing space that's kitted out with wonderful, wonderful resources for you guys to use. But if we really know how to use them, we can get the maximum benefit out of it with the children. So there are resources in this room that can activate almost all of our senses. The only two that, because of COVID and because of hygienic reasons, obviously with children sharing the rooms, that might not be on offer would be the oral motor or our sense of taste, and also the sense of smell. That would be because some children would be coming into the room who would be really sensitive to different smells, so it might not be a great idea to have different essential oils around the room. So if you would like to activate those senses in your child or to use them as part of your child's plan while they're in the sensory room, it might be a good idea to bring along your child's chewy or a snack for that oral motor sense. And it might be a good idea to bring along some things that they can smell while they're here if that's what helps them to feel calm. Otherwise, the sensory rooms here have you covered. There are different visually stimulating resources. There are things that have lovely sounds, nature sounds. The bubble machine has a gorgeous sound that can be really soothing and nurturing for a child who's feeling overwhelmed. There are different tactile experiences that the child can have, like the LED light up the panel, and there's different wall panels in the room that the child can touch and explore that tactile sense. Finally, there are resources that can activate the proprioceptive and vestibular senses. The proprioception sense is that sense of where our bodies are in space and how we're moving. The vestibular sense is more to do with balance, However, lots of activities and lots of resources in the room will activate both at the same time. So we're going to build a little bit on that proprioception and vestibular sense piece now. When a child comes into the sensory room, there are so many visually stimulating things. If a child is entering the room and they're feeling a little bit heightened already, and we have everything all on at once, or it just feels a little bit unfamiliar to them, they can actually become slightly more heightened or significantly more heightened. Introducing some proprioceptive or vestibular input can be very calming for a child. Again, you will know this child best, better than the librarians and better than the person who was using the room before you that day. So it's important that you trust your gut on what might be calming for your own child. Introducing some rolling or crashing or tumbling or climbing can be really calming for one child, while another child might really need to just lay on a beanbag and look up at the projector to relax. Having some form of activity where the child is using their muscles and having to use their strength and figure out where their body is and how it's feeling that day can be really calming and grounding for a child, and you're also helping them to learn to self-regulate. So when we're talking about self-regulation, we're talking about the child's ability to be in touch with their own bodies, emotions and feelings, how they're feeling, and how they can improve that feeling. What I'm talking about is maybe a child is feeling really heightened or starting to feel a bit bored or fed up with the activity that they're doing. We want them to recognize that for themselves. It's a skill that they can build over time. And once they recognize that, it's really important that they know what to do about it without having to rely on another person to show them. For example, if a child is starting to feel a bit fed up at story time, they might be able to signal that they need to use a box of sensory toys or go and use the sensory room to regulate themselves. This is a wonderful skill to develop. It helps them to be independent, helps them to feel more in control of their bodies and their experiences, and also they're going to do this really healthy thing that helps them to feel calm. So we're providing this appropriate space for them to carry out these enjoyable activities that will help them to feel calm and relaxed. It's really beneficial to teach them this skill. So now we're going to go through some of the different equipment that's in the room that might be able to help these children to work on that regulation that we were talking about, or some of these other developmental tasks like their fine and gross motor skills, or building their strength, focus, coordination, or maybe just working on keeping their attention on a specific activity. The added benefit that you get while you're in a sensory room is while you're doing these different tasks that I'm discussing, you're also getting this sensory input and building up your child's tolerance of these different sensory inputs. So that might look like building up their tolerance to visual stimuli. For example, the bubble machine. While you're watching these really relaxing bubbles rise and fall, you're also getting this kind of lack of predictability with where the bubble's going to go. They're constantly moving. The colors are changing. The fish are moving around the bubble tank. So you're giving them that really lovely visual sensory input and also exposing them to a new type of visual sensory input. And it also provides auditory input. So that's our hearing. So we're getting this lovely sense of the bubbles going up and down, and you can hear that, and it can be very calming for one child. It might be heightening for another, so you're watching out all the time for a child's cues. What's their body language looking like? Are they calm and relaxed? Do they look like they're becoming a little bit agitated? So we want to look out for those cues and respond appropriately. We're not turning it off because we're seeing these cues. We're asking the child, would they like us to turn it off or move on to something else? A great way to do this is for you as the adult to engage with another resource and show them how fun it is if you think it's something that will be beneficial for the child. Allowing them to make the choice themselves to move from one resource to another is building a lovely sense of autonomy and control, which is great because we want them to come into this room and feel like they're the boss of play, and you can be the boss of safety and boundaries while they're using the room. The bubble machine has lots of different things that you can do with it. You can just watch the bubbles go up and down. However, there's also a lovely activity where you can change the different colors of the lights that are in the bubble machine. Following on from that, there are the fiber optic lights. These are a really cool and versatile resource. This offers tactile input because you can interact with the fiber optic lights. You can plait them, put them into patterns, different shapes, And you also get auditory input because they make a very unique sound as you rustle the different lights together. And finally, it offers a visual sensory input because you're watching the different lights change. There's different speckles throughout the lights. So this can be a very calming resource for a child. This corner has a lot of visual sensory input. So anything else going on in the room might make it a little bit overwhelming. What can be helpful for a child is to cordon this room or this little section of the room off into kind of a cozy, safe space. You can do this using a blue mat that we have on offer in this room, or some of the other sensory rooms have different colored mats, and you can create little corners, little contained spaces within the room to give the child a sense of safety and security while they're interacting with these individual resources. You can also use the bean bags or different partitions that might be available in the room. Another form of visual sensory input that is available in these sensory rooms is the egg light. In some libraries, that will be shaped like an egg. In some libraries, that will be shaped like a little cube or a chair. It will depend on the individual library. So this is basically a color-changing object that the child can interact with while they're maybe playing with a basket of sensory toys or using another resource in the room. It can be really calming because it offers a soft glow and it changes. So we're giving different colors of input while the child is interacting with the resource. The next resource in this sensory room is the LED light up wall panels. These are a really cool resource. Not every sensory room will have these. So this might be really good for a child who's working on their focus or concentration, or who actually finds completing a task regulating and calming. So as I said, some children want to crash on the beanbag, just lay there and take in the room, look at the lights and listen to the sounds. For other children, what might be more calming and grounding for them after being in the busy library is focusing on this specific task, tracing these shapes on the light up wall panel or pressing the different buttons and interacting with the panels. So we're getting all types of input, as you can imagine. We're getting that tactile, the touch sense. We're also listening to the different sounds that the panels are making, and we're getting that lovely visual input with all the different lights, shapes, and colors on the panels. So while we're using these panels, we can get a little bit carried away and sometimes get more focused on the developmental tasks or the educational benefits than making sure that the child is really enjoying themselves. If we find that the child is getting a bit bored or has done enough, it's important to offer a relaxing activity next, or to suggest something that you know is calming for the child. If they're not enjoying the activity and they're not feeling relaxed, or they're feeling like they have to do it, or the focus is purely on education or development, they likely won't get as much out of their time in the library. So if they only do 1 minute of interacting with the light up wall panel, and the next time they come and they want to play with it again, you might find that they'll play with it for a little bit longer, or they might not play with it at all, but that it's their choice whether or not they interact with it. And that's really important that we don't forget that this room is a space for them to come to feel safe and in control and calm. So here in the library in Athlone, they've put a lot of effort into making sure that their tactile wall panels in the sensory room offer almost every touch sensation that you can imagine. There's a panel of artificial grass that you can rub your hands through. You get that lovely feeling like your hand is in grass, and it could be cold and it's kind of smooth and prickly all at the same time. So you're really expanding that tactile sense for your child. Beside that, we have this lovely panel that has all different colors and textures that the child can interact with as they please. There's different bumpy and lumpy and wobbly boards that you can touch, and there's different mirrored objects. There's things that are smooth and not so smooth, and the child can interact with this tactile input, which can be really calming for them, while they're also maybe listening to nature sounds in a dark room with just 1 or 2 other resources on at that time. So what they're doing is interacting with different textures that at other times they might not be as keen to interact with because of the environment that surrounds them. So you're kind of expanding that tolerance of these different textures while they're in the room. As always, it's really important that the child is comfortable and feels safe and is enjoying this time. That's what this time is all about. We don't want to be too focused on expanding their tolerance of these textures. We're more so focused on, are they enjoying it? Is their body getting too tense, and should we offer for them to do something else in the room, or are they calm and relaxed and enjoying it? So we also want to make sure that we're focusing on that proprioceptive and vestibular input like we were talking about earlier. We can do that through crashing into the bean bags, creating an obstacle course, playing the floor as lava, bouncing on a ball, whatever it takes to use our muscles while we're in the room. Otherwise, we might be leaving a little bit too heightened. What does heightened look like? Well, it will look different for any child. For one child, that might look like they're bouncing off the walls, and for another, they might leave the room maybe looking calm, a little agitated, and might have a meltdown a few hours later. So they might appear calm, but you might notice that all of that overstimulation really built up and kind of presents later in the day, or even the next day, or at bedtime. So a way that we can prevent that is giving them that calming proprioceptive or vestibular input while they're in the room. This is a really fun part for kids. So they're coming in here after maybe having to walk or sit or listen at story time, which is really enjoyable, but can be a bit tricky when our body is feeling a little bit wobbly and we just need to get some of that out. So setting up a crash pad where they can jump into a pile of bean bags or cushions, rolling across a mat, doing bear crawls, crawling on all fours, whatever it is to use our bodies while we're in the sensory room can be so calming. It can be easy to forget about doing these different types of activities while we're in a sensory room because the equipment is so wonderful that we get distracted by all of the lights and the noises. But offering some movement in conjunction with these resources makes it extra beneficial. You will get the maximum benefit out of the room. So I really suggest linking in again with an occupational therapist, or even just doing a little research yourself, or just knowing what works best for this child. If you know that deep pressure works well for the child, offering some deep pressure, if you've linked in with an occupational therapist around how to do it, of course, while they're watching the bubbles on the bubble machine, can be such a relaxing multisensory experience. So remember, although it is a multi-sensory room, we don't need to access all of the senses all at once, all of the time. One resource that the child finds particularly helpful or relaxing can be more powerful for a few minutes for that child than using all of the resources in the room for a half an hour, which might actually have detrimental benefits for the child's well-being for the rest of the day. You might find that they're a little bit dysregulated. So that one resource, like the textured wall panel or the bubble machine or the LED light up panels, or laying on a beanbag looking up at the projector for just a few minutes, can really make a difference to that child's day. Finally, there are other resources that are available in this room and in the other sensory rooms. It can be really overwhelming because sometimes there will be other children using different resources at the same time as you're in the room. This won't always be the case, and different libraries have different rules. However, it's important to know how to create your own safe space within the room. I've talked a little bit about creating cozy corners around the bubble machines and things like that, but that's something that you can actually do anywhere within the sensory room and even anywhere within the actual library itself. So if you're really enjoying playing with this textured wall panel, it can be nice to kind of cordon yourself in, maybe bring along ear defenders or a chewy or something that you know is really regulating for your child that can help them to enjoy their little corner of the sensory room. So if another child is making a lot of noise and really loving the bubble machine and interacting with it in a really audible way, it won't really disrupt your time as much if you have the things that you need to do. For example, if the child is really auditory sensitive, it can be a great idea to bring those ear defenders to maybe limit the noise in the immediate surroundings, to limit the other sensory input with lights and things like that. So just to modify the room as you need, and to always link in with the librarians about this topic. They're so knowledgeable and they really want to help. The purpose of these sensory rooms is to help your child enjoy their time in the library, to make these libraries more accessible to them, and to even expand the amount of time the child is able to spend in the library. Little by little, we want them to develop this positive association with coming to their local library. We can do that through offering a safe, calm, relaxing space that they know that they can access if they need it.